Hello and welcome to Your New Jersey. I'm Lisa Marie Falbo. Today, we're coming to you from New York Waterway to commemorate the 15th anniversary of the Miracle on the Hudson. On January 15, 2009, U.S. Airways Flight 1549 landed on the Hudson River after striking a flock of birds shortly after takeoff from LaGuardia Airport. New York Waterway ferries, along with other boats, including the United States Coast Guard, arrived within minutes of the crash landing and safely rescued all 155 people on board. Today, we meet the passengers and the brave first responders who were at the scene.
Welcome to the 15th anniversary of the Miracle on the Hudson, a catastrophic event when the plane struck a flock of birds soon after takeoff. A round of applause for the amazing crew, passengers, emergency services, Red Cross, who kept it all together in those crazy 4 minutes of descent and during the subsequent rescue.
15 years since that day, and the day is like a carbon copy, right?
Close.
It's gray, it's
Yep.
like bitter cold, but you're the mastermind behind this operation here today, getting everybody together, the Red Cross, first responders, other passengers.
Yep.
Why is this a passion project for you?
Well, I think the crew and passengers, we have the opportunity to be in front of people all the time, and I'm honored to do that. But a lot of times the first responders are forgotten. And it was one of my passions. And last summer when we were talking about this, like, I really want to do something for the first responders on both the New Jersey and the New York side.
Yeah.
So this is how this all came together about back in August. And it's like, we want to celebrate them, recognize them, and thank them for that service they had that day.
Okay, so you feel the boom. What was going through your mind? I mean, yes, you thought terrorist attack, but what else?
First I thought, okay, we have another engine. We'll get back to the airport. I'm not getting home early today. But then, all of a sudden, no one, that's why I think one of the biggest things out of this is no one knew that, except the captain and the crew, that it happened on both sides of the plane simultaneously, right? Both engines got knocked out. So I think if anybody would have known that, it could have been some panic, but no one knew that, so there was no panic on the plane.
So it's not like Captain Sully was on the loudspeaker giving you play-by-play. It was just silence.
Silence until
as
he
you're
said his words.
gliding over Manhattan.
Yep.
What did it feel like physically?
I felt a little bumpy, and then when he crossed over the George Washington, I felt him felt going back because he had to get it up and then get over the bridge. That's when I knew, okay, this is going to be a rough landing one way or another. It's going to be a rough landing.
Did you think like, oh my God, we're landing in the water?
As soon as I saw the water, as soon as I looked up and saw the bridge, I'm like, he's going straight to the water. And I never see anything positive in a plane crash in the water.
So you're on the wing of the plane. No,
Yep.
where?
I was inside the plane the entire time.
And then, but you
I had to swim.
You had to. Okay, so take
Yeah.
me through that.
So I felt the plane shift. And I found out later when I was speaking with one of the first responders that one of the ferries or one of the boats got hit. It hit the front of the plane, it shook the plane, and that's when I felt the shake. That's when I jumped in because I didn't want to be caught inside of a plane going down in the Hudson River. So I jumped in and swam the closest boat that I could find into that wing. And I tell people it's the longest 15-yard swim of my life.
You've done other things in New Jersey to commemorate this Miracle on the Hudson.
Most definitely. I do a lot with now it's called Hackensack Palisades. Do a lot with the hospital that helped me that day. With the Red Cross in New Jersey, I do a lot with the Red Cross. So yeah, I come back to New Jersey 3 or 4 times a year to just thank those folks because some of the first responders today are from New Jersey, were there that day.
It was one of those days where I get a call from the mayor, which I get once in a while, and he calls me up and said, a big plane just crashed into the Hudson River. My first response is, that's not funny, but it was true. From that time on, it was all hands on deck. We sent every available police, fire, EMS people down to the waterfront where New York Waterways has their terminal, and fortunately store some of their ferries that were ready to make the evening rush hour run. With that, we put police, fire, EMS people on those ferries with waterway people and went out to the plane and made several hundred rescues. Along with Coast Guard, FDNY. It was an amazing day. But that was only the first part. The important part for us was it isn't a miracle until we accounted for all 155 people.
Today, as we gather to commemorate the 15th anniversary of the Miracle on the Hudson, and it was a miracle, but it also demonstrated the courage, the resilience, and the brilliance of those whose actions saved 155 lives that day. including, of course, Captain Sully Sullenberger. And I am reminded, too, of the ways in which the Miracle on the Hudson was a team effort. How the crew led the successful evacuation of the plane, how first responders rescued passengers stranded on the wings of the plane out of the Hudson River, and how New York waterway ferries arrived within 2 minutes to usher people to safety. How medical staff and the Red Cross cared for injured passengers and crew. The bravery and calm of these workers was essential to ensuring the safety of the passengers of Flight 1549.
This footage, enhanced by CNN, shows the jet upon impact. Likely flying near 150 miles per hour, impact with the water was violent. The jet touched down at roughly 3:30 local time on one of the coldest days so far this year. Early reports that attributed their information to government officials with the FAA said that the pilot had reported during departure that the aircraft suffered multiple bird strikes shortly after leaving runway 4 at LaGuardia.
Mayor, I'm sure you still can't believe what you saw out your window that day.
I was on the 3rd floor on Boulevard East. You overlook the whole river, and you see this big airliner slowly descending into the river. And so the first few moments, you're stunned. And so we called, a lot of people called the emergency services numbers. And what was great is the response. New York Waterway sent all their boats over. The police, the fire, the EMS, the Office of Emergency Services, great response. Because, it was a serious situation. The plane was slowly sinking. It was moving down the river. It's a very strong current. And you had to get there fast. And everybody should be very proud that we have great emergency services.
As Mayor of Weehawken, what did you do next to mobilize maybe some of your police?
About half of the passengers went to New York side, and the other half went to Jersey. There was a closed restaurant. We opened it up. We put them in because it was very cold.
Yeah.
It was a colder
It was just
day
like
than
today.
Colder. It was
Really?
even colder, yeah. So then we brought them to our senior center to get them, dry, something to eat, something to drink. So we opened up all our facilities for the passengers, and then some went to the hospital.
Yeah, and you had to act quick to mobilize all of that, which speaks to the operation that you're running over there.
What we do is just you call the police, you call the fire, and everybody knows how to respond. We have great system to respond. I don't think anything has been more appropriately named than a Miracle on the Hudson.
New York Waterway's ferry captains were close at hand. Pilots managed their airspeed and a wings level touchdown, and had any of those factors been different, the aircraft's structure could easily have been compromised, subjecting all aboard to a much more violent impact, possible immersion in the icy water, and a quick hypothermic death.
15 years has gone by since probably the craziest workday you've ever had.
Yes.
Take us through.
It was pretty normal day, nice cold day, typical New Jersey day, and I just happened to be stopping by EMS. I wasn't working EMS that day, and I was grabbing something, and Jeff calls me and says, we got a report of a plane in the water. And as I started getting closer, I could see that people were standing on the wings. And I called our county coordinator for EMS and OEM, Office of Emergency Management, and let him know that it was a real aircraft, a large aircraft, and we put our plans in motion.
What were those plans?
So coincidentally, 1 month prior to that, we had just finalized the plans for a plan that we call the Port Security Initiative, which is a plan that the state police and the EMS task force for the state has put together. We had plans in place for a sinking ferry, a disaster on a cruise ship, a sinking or capsized vessel. So I immediately got there and said, well, it's an airplane, something in the water, I'm going to treat it the same way. And we executed the plan and put everything in motion. 98% of that plan was executed within the first hour.
You do all these plans and training, and you never think, you pray that it never happens, and it happens. So it's kind of muscle memory at that point. That's where the training
Absolutely.
kicks in, because you don't have much time to think.
Absolutely.
How do you plan for an event like January 15th, 2009?
I'll tell you, it all came from the roots of September 11, 2001. On that day, I was a paramedic. I responded to the World Trade Center disaster and whatnot. And after that whole big ordeal, we had to change the way we think about responding to these high-impact major events and whatnot. So one of our projects that came through all this was you know, we border New York. We have a lot of critical infrastructure here along the river, ports, ferry terminals, chemical facilities, refineries. So because of that, we had to get together and come up with a plan on how to respond to catastrophic events.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how successful was the plan? Like, did you make tweaks to the plan after?
Oh, of course. You know what I mean? Not every plan is perfect, and we practice it and we identify shortfalls, and then we rewrite the plan and update it. I will say, though, what made it perfect is that everyone survived. And you know, at the end of the day, that's all that mattered. Yeah. So I would give it a 10.
You'd give it a 10, of course, of course.
The crew likely first considered a return to LaGuardia, and though Teterboro Airport in New Jersey may also have been visible to the pilots, the turns required to make the runway could have bled the aircraft of speed or altitude necessary to reach it. External factors aside, turning an aircraft while holding altitude requires power. Otherwise, the aircraft will either lose airspeed or lose altitude. To a pilot, the Hudson River, free of housing developments, free of trees and roads, and after a partial turn toward LaGuardia, would clearly have presented an imperfect but inviting alternative.
Thank you all for coming today, Dave. Thank you for putting this together. This is a wonderful day. We're here to remember and to celebrate the miracle on the Hudson. It's been said before, and I'm going to say it again. Captain Sully saved the lives of all the crew and passenger on that day. Then he just needed our help to get them out of harm's way and on dry land and warm and safe. So that's when we came in. What you see right here is the first thing we saw when we got on the scene. What you don't see is the ferries. They were the first ones to respond. They're not trained like we are, but they were the first ones to respond. Captain Lombardi, when they were returning to the dock by our restaurant, allowed me to put our companies on there. We had a task force down there. And they wanted to go out and help, so they did. It made a big difference. We happened to have a restaurant right where my command post was that had just closed. Luckily, the heat was still on. So that became our treatment and triage location. It's where EMS came in. They had it set up inside where they get blankets, treating people. They gave me phones to call their relatives at home to make sure everybody knew they were okay. It was a very important part of the whole scenario.
It's an honor to be here today. I'm Captain John Andrzejczyk, the Deputy Sector Commander of Coast Guard Sector New York, and I'm here to represent the men and women of the Coast Guard who answered the call on January 15th, 2009. Women like then Lieutenant Karen Damon and Ms. Michelle Krupa, who were on watch in the Coast Guard's command center on Staten Island and immediately dispatched rescue boats from Coast Guard Station New York to the scene. And men like Mr. Bob Mosley, who was on watch in the Coast Guard's vessel traffic service and having just watched Flight 1549 land in the Hudson River on nearby vessel traffic cameras, immediately alerted and carefully directed commercial mariners in the vicinity. And of course, the Coast Guard rescue crews, including then Petty Officer Ben Foster, who upon arriving on scene, entered the water to assist an elderly passenger. In the Coast Guard, there are no ordinary days. Semper Paratus, or always ready, is the Coast Guard's motto. It has long been the perfect complement to one of our primary missions, the one we are most known for, and that is being ready at a moment's notice to render aid to those in peril on the sea and in the waters of the harbors and ports we protect every day.
My name is Denise Locke. I was passenger 2C, and I can only say that in the past 15 years, I'm a multi-million-mile flyer, and that's one heck of a day to remember the grace, the dignity, the respect that I was shown. I am thankful, grateful, and if it hadn't been for that New York firefighters, we're all one team, we're all one family. There's nothing I can't say about how grateful I am personally that I was able to go home and be with my family after 1549, 15 years ago. And lastly but not least, I've put together this necklace of all of my memories from that day. So once again, if there's anything that you remember that you can help us out, other passengers that have those blank memories, we would greatly appreciate it.
You're talking to probably the most fearful flyer ever. So I need to know this. How did you stay calm during that?
I just realized that I had no control over the situation. And the thing that bothered me the most was my family, my father and my sister. I didn't know how they were going to survive. My mother had passed away a few years before, and I just didn't understand how they were going to be able to get through all the trials and tribulations of bearing another daughter.
It's interesting that you were thinking of others
Yes.
in that time and not yourself. And Dave said the same thing, that the movie of his life was playing.
Yes.
And it was a piece
I
almost.
was very much at peace.
Before the landing, Dave mentioned there was nothing said. The only thing the captain said on the loudspeaker was brace for impact.
Yes.
So you were left to your own imagination what was happening. And I can imagine that physically it felt like a roller coaster ride to hell.
Yes. Yes, it was definitely a roller coaster to hell. And I heard more because I was in the front of the aircraft, so I actually heard the cockpit.
Oh.
I could hear terrain, pull up, pull up. So I knew that wasn't good. But I kept thinking in the back of my mind, well, we're going to go back into LaGuardia, even though we were in the wrong direction to go back. I was thinking, well, maybe last second he'll make a turn. And then we might just, when you go over to LaGuardia, over the water, I said, well, maybe we'll just be short of the runway, it won't be that bad. I was thinking all these crazy things in my mind. But obviously, it was the Hudson River.
When the birds hit and the engine stopped, did you feel that?
Oh, absolutely. The whole plane shook. I was black and blue from head to toe. I had a seatbelt fastened, and it was obviously I was bruised, my right ankle. I just had so many bruises on me. It looked like, my goodness, I broke a couple fingernails. Took my glasses off, so I couldn't really see anything at the moment. But by later in the day, I was feeling a little bit of pain, a little bit of discomfort.
Did you have hypothermia or any symptoms?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah. The psychological effects of this, though. You are a very calm, collected person, but I mean, that had to weigh on you in the days, weeks, months, years following.
Well, I was fortunate enough to go through some intense counseling, and occasionally I feel that I need to go back and see my counselor, but she lives in Colorado. She's fantastic. And my other counselor, who was actually one of the counselors after 9/11, that's where she did all of her training for her doctorate, which is one of the most amazing women I've ever met in my life. But I really get grounded and I talk about it. And a lot of times they say when you have PTSD, you don't talk about it. And I think that's really kind of a personal opinion. Do I have my moments? Absolutely.
You spoke here today and you talked about your role 15 years ago with the Miracle on the Hudson.
Correct.
Take us back through that fateful day.
Basically, I was in my office with a medical emergency and I could not get an ambulance to come to help me. And a police officer came and I asked him what's going on. And he says, Doc, did you see the news? I said, no, what's going on? And he says, a plane landed on the river. I go, what do you mean a plane landed on the river? I quickly changed. I put my surgical scrubs. I gathered some items from my office and I asked one of my employees to come with me. And I drove myself to the marina. I was in shock. It was everything very eerie. All the passengers were sitting. There was no noise, no sounds. The only sound that I could hear was the baby crying. So immediately what I did is I kind of took survey of the area. I went to the baby first, of course. And when I noticed that there was no one bodily injury, there was nobody bleeding, nobody screaming, then I noticed that they were all wet. So now immediately my military and my medical army kicked in. I said, oh my God, frostbite. They're gonna get, it was below 20 degrees and it was in the afternoon and they were sitting there for quite a few. So what I did immediately, I said, okay, we need to get this wet clothes off. I had them take their shoes off and then I started getting plastic bags, believe it or not, plastic bags and wrapping them on their feet.
What hospital were you working with at the time and where did all the patients go to?
So I was working in my practice, private practice in West New York, and the hospital that I'm affiliated was Palisade General Hospital at the time, which is called Hackensack now, and Hoboken Hospital, and the Meadowlands Hospital. But because the other hospital was a little bit too far, Meadowlands, the sick were transferred to the nearest hospital, which was Palisade General Hospital, Hackensack.
Reflecting 15 years later, not only are you a hero, you were in a movie based on the events of that day. Talk to us about that experience.
So that was a little bit life-changing. It was an experience that, you know, I never thought that would happen to me.
Yeah.
I gotta say, it was quite humbling. The best part was working with Clint Eastwood. He was my movie hero. You know, me and my father. I just grew up watching his movies. Some of my favorite films ever was with Clint Eastwood. And actually getting to work with him and sit down and have lunch with him. I must have spent, 4 days here with him and 4 days in California with him. And it was amazing. He was such a great man. And everybody on that set, all the other actors, all the background actors, all the producers, all the positions, cameramen, everybody was so great to work with, so welcoming. And it was a really wonderful experience, and they had such great things to say. So it was really an atmosphere full of positive energy.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add, remembering 15 years ago?
Well, I would like to say, just to keep the memory of Captain John Wynorski. Unfortunately, he was part of this rescue, but he passed away a couple years ago. And, everybody was grateful for his service and what he did that day and the amount of people he rescued.
Volunteers are the superpower of the American Red Cross. They are the backbone of everything that we do. They make up 90% of our workforce. We could not do our work or carry out the American Red Cross mission without them. The volunteers and staff who have joined me here today responded on that fateful day 15 years ago and the days that followed. I am grateful to them for their compassion and dedication to helping others that day and every day.
And what you heard today was how the term miracle really, really applies. 155 individuals. I was on the third floor of a building overlooking the river, until you see a major airline plane land in the Hudson River. Very soft landing. It's something that hopefully we'll never have to see again. But you saw today a whole team, the New York side, the New Jersey side, fire, police, EMS, medical, New York waterway personnel, captains, Red Cross. One thing we should all be very proud of is that in this region, we have the best emergency personnel that you could have any place. They're outstanding. Everybody plays a part. New York Waterway's there. The Red Cross arrives. Police, like I said, police, fire, ambulance, regional ambulance. It's really astounding how everyone responds. We had New York City police officers coming to Weehawken, as the director said, trying to keep track of all the passengers. So once again, I can't say enough how you have to admire our emergency management personnel, and we're very happy that all 155 passengers got off that plane that was starting to sink as well as they did. So it's a pleasure to be here today to remember how everybody worked together. Thank you all.
Dave, this was so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story, getting everybody together. There's so many press cameras here and people excited to be celebrating you and everybody. And I'm so happy that it all worked out.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me on this special episode of Your New Jersey. I'm Lisa Marie Falbo. We'll see you back here next week. Next month on Your New Jersey.
When I started booking work as an actor and considered a working actor, I realized how much downtime there was. So I wanted to learn the business inside and out, and I did. I spent time in Los Angeles, about 7 years. And when I came back to New Jersey, I said, I'm going to make a go at this. So I started writing more, producing more. And then when I wrote The Bastard Sons with a partner of mine, his name is Glenn Rodriguez, also from New Jersey, I couldn't let it go. So I said, I think I could tell this story. I think I could direct this. And, people have been responding well to it. So
during the peak of COVID, I went to one of the local dollar stores to try to find some supplies for the house like everybody else was doing. and there was an elderly lady in line who was buying some pasta and some pasta sauces and cat food. And when they rung her up, she didn't have enough money to pay for everything. So she said, "Put the food back. I'll take the cat food because my cats will eat before I do." So I told her, "Go get what you need," and I ended up paying for, everything. And then I called my wife up. I said, "We need to do something to help people feed their animals in the time of need."
You two hold a very special place in our family's heart. You responded to my father's call on August 9th, 2023. He was driving along 78 and pulled over because he felt pain. Called 911, and you two angels, along with many others, came to his assistance.
And the scary thing is that 9 out of 10 people who have a widowmaker outside the hospital do not survive. If my boys were not home and if they were not trained on how to do CPR, I would have died. I would not be here doing this interview with you. And so because of what they did to save my life, I decided to partner with the American Heart Association to tell the story of the importance of learning CPR.